A must-see interview, tech tyrants' huge plans for the future, and finally, governors encourage citizens to rat out their own neighbors on Thanksgiving. All that and more on this episode of the Federalist Files. But first, this short clip.
Man leaps into the water to grab a hold of his King Charles Spaniel and wrest it from the jaws of the alligator. It takes several seconds until he's able to put the gator down, shake the puppy from its grip. The puppy did suffer a puncture to its belly, but is doing just fine after a trip to the vet.
Anyone listening that didn't know what they were just listening to, I'm gonna fill you in. That is a man from Florida, a Florida man in the search results. If you've ever looked up the Florida man on your birthday, it was a Florida man, probably in the 60s. You got to give credit where it's due. The speed and agility is obviously very impressive, and just the fearlessness, honestly. But it's a Florida man jumping into a pond in Florida, obviously, and he is wrestling his puppy from a baby alligator's mouth, and the entire time he has a cigar in his mouth, and the cigar never leaves. He even jumps, he's even about, he's completely submerged at one point in the water, but he still holds that cigar in his mouth. It's like that classic joke from that movie Donnie Boy, or what's the name of that movie with not Mark Wahlberg, Adam Sandler, where Adam Sandler doesn't spill his beer. He ends up sleeping with the high school teacher when he was like 13 or 14 years old. And then he's always, the big joke is I never spilled my beer. That's this whole thing, is this weird Boston accent thing going on. But yeah, Florida man, you impressed me, Florida man. And the real question to ask is, any of you animal owners out there, any of you dog owners, I know you probably would not do this for a cat, but maybe for a dog or a puppy, would you jump into a pond and wrestle an alligator to get your puppy out? Now, this is going to be a current event video, just smooth transition over to this. We're going to be confronting, or rather addressing, the draconian lockdown measures that have been put forth by a lot of tyrannical governors. Actually, one of them is a Republican we're going to go through in this video. I mean, anybody that's from Jersey that listens, you are familiar with these lockdowns. It is something that's not foreign to you. There was a video that just came out of these people pretty much, accosting Governor Murphy in a restaurant with his family, yelling at him and all these other antics. And if they were more, I kind of wish they were a little more persuasive or professional in the encounter. He kind of gave that interaction really made conservatives or people that vote opposing to him, or people that like liberty and freedom, made this not look too good in that video there. But now we have multiple videos. Got Kate Brown, Oregon governor, and then a reaction from Governor Abbott, and then a Governor Cuomo video, which is quite humorous and hypocritical, and then a Larry Hogan. Larry Hogan's a Republican governor from Maryland. He's a rhino Republican. Everybody knows that. He does whatever's politically expedient to him. So we're going to start first with a quote from the Oregon Governor Kate Brown. Play clip 6.
Just mentioned, set by Governor Brown, has almost been in effect for the first half. I told you news that restrictions are in place to prevent more infections and hopefully more deaths. The so-called freeze also limits social gathering, but there have been some leaders who say these restrictions and the plans to enforce them are simply too much. Governor Brown signed an executive order that makes those restrictions enforceable with arrests or fines. So we want to know if that means people should call police if they see neighbors ignoring those rules.
This is no different than what happens if there's a party down the street and it's keeping everyone awake. What do neighbors do? They call law enforcement because it's too noisy.
That could be a yes.
Yes.
Now what you just listened to, that is Governor Kate Brown saying that is nothing different to call the cops on your neighbors on Thanksgiving for not following the instructions from her executive order. I think it's a 6-person maximum in Oregon right now. It's nothing different than a sound ordinance, or calling the cops because it's too loud. which is just so reprehensible and ridiculous, because them doing their thing over in their house is not affecting you in any way. At least you can make the argument, if there's a sound ordinance in your town, at least it affects you in a way in which you can't sleep. If somebody, your neighbor right next to you, is being very loud and disruptive, if you have kids and they have to go to school the next day, you can at least make that argument that it affects you that way. But somebody else having, more than 6 people in their home, and they're not doing anything rowdy and they're just in their own home, tell me how that has a direct impact on you and how you are carrying out your Thanksgiving. It doesn't. It's just another executive order, an arbitrary order by a governor that is hungry and thirsty for power, and it is very odious. It's reprehensible. And I have an answer. I have a response from Governor Abbott. He's a Republican governor of Texas, and so far on the lockdowns, he hasn't been too bad. I think he did lock down for a very short period of time, or he required some sort of face covering for the people of Texas. Texas used to be a real beacon for conservatism. Usually they always voted red. Now it seems like they're getting a little bit more in the middle. But I have his response right here, and we're going to take a listen to that. Play clip 8.
Governor, before you go, the governor of Oregon, a woman by the name of Kate Brown, says, hey, if you see anybody breaking any of our state suggestions and guidelines, call the cops. Is that the way they should handle that? Call the cops if you see somebody walking around with no mask?
I got to tell you, I think they may have some Fourth Amendment-based challenges there, but also I have to point out the irony. If I understand correctly, Oregon just legalized heroin and maybe cocaine.
Yes.
And so it's okay to have heroin and cocaine, but not turkey for Thanksgiving. That is un-American. It just does not make sense.
So you got yourself a very witty response from Governor Abbott. He's pretty much saying Fourth Amendment. And then also on top of that, which is very weird and remarkable, actually, is the fact that they either legalized or they decriminalized heroin as well as cocaine, which I didn't know in Oregon. I guess that was the last vote they had in their election. They must have had some sort of a provisional vote for that. Now, I have the Fourth Amendment here, and it reads, and I quote, "The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath of affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized," end quote. So yes, he is correct. Now, to begin with, these are not actual even laws. These restrictions, these executive orders by the governor, they're not even really laws because they did not pass through the legislature, and the legislature is in charge of making the laws. So you don't even see a state legislature making these provisions saying you can only have 6 people in your home. And to begin with, it's completely unconstitutional. You can't tell people really what they can do in their home, especially if they're not committing any type of felony or crime. You can't do that. And if you're going to, you do need a warrant to walk into someone's room and then into someone's house and make an arrest. And that warrant is usually established on a probable cause basis. So if you have a probable cause, if you have some sort of information, let's say that somebody's a drug dealer, and it has to be a legitimate testimony, or it has to be some sort of video evidence that that this person is a drug dealer or they have drugs, then you have the probable cause to go get a warrant. You have to go through a judge to get the warrant. So what happened here in this scenario, if anybody has heard about the scenario in Buffalo, New York, that's exactly what their argument was the Fourth Amendment. And their argument was, an executive order is much more like a recommendation than it is actually a law. And they are correct. It is more like kind of how the CDC gives their recommendation, what you should be doing for the holidays, how you should dress, if you should wear a mask, if you should see your family members, that whole thing that's going on right now. It is much more like a recommendation than something that's actually constitutional or something that is set in law. So in New Jersey, for example, I don't know if we even have a number at this point. I know there's certain executive orders on times. Everything has to close at 10 o'clock or something like that. I think they're going to start closing the gym soon, just like they did live in the very beginning. And people are sick of this, and that's the point that I'm trying to bring up here. Now, in Buffalo, New York, somebody must have walked into a business they did not like. There was either a lack of social distancing or they believed there was too many people in the business. So what they did was they called the police department. Police department goes and gets themselves a health inspector, and then the health inspector comes in with the police officer, and they're asking people questions. And then these people at first, I think, were much more compliant, and then they realized in the back of their head, they were just like, what the heck are you guys even doing here? You guys have no right to just walk right in. This is private property. You need a warrant. Do you have a warrant? And then the lady, you know, the health inspector's like, oh, well, you know, this is different. You don't really need a warrant to do something like this. And he's like, well, did I commit a crime? Like, am I doing something wrong? And then I think she was trying to infer, yes, he was doing something wrong. And then the owner, or, you know, the people in the business, must be like some sort of family-owned business, saying, okay, then lock me up. He's like, put the cuffs on me, lock me up, and walk me out of here. Perp walk me out of my own business for existing. They wouldn't do it, obviously, and then they kept stating, you know, that's an executive order. And then one guy at the very end is saying, you can't subvert the Constitution, you can't circumvent the Constitution, that's an unconstitutional order. He was the person of he was the all-knowing one. He was much more of a, you know, educated than the other ones on constitutional provisions. The other people were just like, oh, get me a warrant. But he really knew what he was talking about. He was the voice of reason, essentially. But that's what's going on right now. We have and then there was another video in a Costco in Georgia, and that one's weird because it was a father and son. Apparently the son took off his mask when they were waiting in line to check out, and in doing so, the response from the employee was to call the cops. And it was like a manager. He called the cops. Cops showed up. They're arresting the father, because then the son handed the father the card to pay, and the employee was saying that he handed him a knife. I don't know what the deal was there, but if they were really arresting that guy for not having a mask for a couple seconds in a Costco, to begin with, you know, full disclosure, I worked for Costco at one point, so anything in the media they hate unless if it's good coverage, so they're probably not too happy with that employee that went and called the cops over something so just innocuous, you know. So I'm sure he's probably getting reprimanded pretty hard, because they do not like being in the news. Now, my next video I have here it's gonna be the Governor Cuomo. He's talking about his COVID orders and how cops should enforce them. Play clip 3.
I believe that law enforcement officer violates his or her constitutional duty. I don't consider them a law enforcement officer, because you don't have the right to pick laws that you think you will enforce, and you don't enforce laws that you don't agree with, right? That's not a law enforcement officer. That's a dictator.
My response to Cuomo characterizing law enforcement officers as dictators is, takes one to know one, bro. You've been doing dictatorial acts this entire time for the last, 9-10 months now at this point, and you've also had your own provisions. Well, we want to talk about a narcissistic individual. Andrew Cuomo is probably, next to Barack Obama, probably the biggest narcissist in all of politics. He had a mural painted of him and his accomplishments through the COVID-19 crisis that he created in these homes, in these nursing homes. I'm pretty sure deaths per 100,000, New York tops every other state in the union. Out of 50 states, he's the worst. He's handled it the worst. I mean, next to him, and then probably Governor Murphy right next to him, they had the same horrible policy. And especially him, he tried to cover himself. He had that terrible policy. What they would do is they took, and hear this is insane what he did, and it's really disgusting. And, you know, when people say, I don't really like the "you have blood on your hands" thing, but I mean, truly, with his policies, he was forcing people. What he did was he forced people that had COVID-19, even younger people, like, into nursing homes because they didn't have anywhere to keep them and house them. Or it was that Murphy. I know Cuomo, what he did, he took older people that had it, and they had to go back to the nursing home. He just sent them back to the nursing home, and when he was sending them back to the nursing home, still with active COVID-19, it wasn't somebody that, you know, hasn't had it for like 2 weeks or whatever, or is healthy from it. They were still sick. He would send them back to the nursing homes, and then he would send over with them body bags to prepare It was almost like he was sending them to kill off the entire population. So that's just what he did. And then if you want to talk about, officers have discretion to enforce certain laws to begin with. And if you're asking an officer who does take an oath to enforce something that's unconstitutional, how do you expect that officer to go ahead and do that? And how are you going to call them a dictator for trying to uphold the rights of the citizens? It doesn't even make any sense. That's what you are. You're the dictator. That's what you've been doing this entire time with all of your orders. And then if anybody questions you, your responses to the media are just nasty. And the fact that the media is questioning you is a huge problem because they're in the pocket of your party. That means you're really screwing up. If you're pissing off the media, who is like the pony horses, or rather they are tantamount to the Democratic Party, as in, I repeat myself, when I say media and I say Democrat Party, I am repeating myself. They're almost this one and the same, just one of them are elected officials. The others are just exactly the same. They support probably 90% of the media coverage is positive with Democrats, and because they're in the Democrat Party's pocket. The fact that they're questioning you really goes to show that you are screwing up big time if you are pissing off journalists that are always on your side 90% of the time. So that's Governor Andrew Cuomo. Next, I have one from a Larry Hogan of Maryland, and his is probably just as preposterous as the one from Andrew Cuomo. Play clip 10.
Sort of like saying, I have a constitutional right to drive drunk. I have a constitutional right to not wear a seatbelt, or to yell fire in a crowded movie theater, or to not follow the speed limit. We're talking about 250,000 people dying already. More than the Korean War, the Gulf War, and the Vietnam War added together. Which part don't you understand? You wear the mask. There's no constitutional right to walk around without a mask. We did it in 1918. I don't know why we can't do it now.
So that's the lovely Larry Hogan. But you know what? I actually want to finish my point about Cuomo. Cuomo went out, he had a mural, and now he's getting some sort of award. And I don't know if anyone's seen the videos, but they have all these celebrities lined up reading off sheets of paper. I wanna congratulate you, Andrew Cuomo, for getting this. It's like a reward for some sort of those stupid Oscars or Grammys or something. Like it's a weird reward that doesn't even make any sense, and that just goes to show how much bootlicking goes on with the Democrat Party and their base of celebrities and elitists, because that's what they are elitists. They think they're better than everybody. They think they're smarter than you. People that are very, very rich, you should never trust them in terms of policy for you. If you're a middle-class American or if you're a lower-class American, there's no reason that you should even trust them, because policies don't hurt them. If they're already worth $100 million, an 80% tax really won't matter to them. It doesn't make a difference. They already made their money. They'll just take their money and move it to offshore accounts, so it can't be touched. Now, with Hogan, what Hogan does is intellectually just pathetic, intellectually dishonest, and also just disingenuous. Comparing deaths to wars, you can really do that with anything. You had 6 million Jews died in World War II during the Holocaust. You had 1 million black people die during the Holocaust as well, because the Germans were killing. The Germans in general killed off about 11 million people. So really, you can compare anything number-wise when it comes to wars. You should use a scenario like a war to compare it to another war, things that are alike or tantamount and similar in a way. It shouldn't be comparing war statistics years ago to things that are happening today. It doesn't really make any sense. Just say what the number is of people that have passed away instead. That would be much more honest. Now, then he also compares the idea of walking outside without a mask on, or just not wearing a mask in general, as driving drunk, which if you do a statistical analysis of the numbers, I'm sure you can Google it. Driving drunk is a much more of a dangerous activity, and your chances of going and killing someone while driving drunk, or even driving above the speed limit, are way higher than your chances of killing someone by not wearing a mask when you have no symptoms of coronavirus. That's another thing. There was a study I was reading, and I don't remember exactly where it came out of, but there was asymptomatic people. They did a study where they followed around asymptomatic people and all the people they had contact with over like a week or so, and no one that they had contact with the people that were supposedly asymptomatic, no one ended up getting it from them. So this whole asymptomatic thing is just another way to enforce a mask on you, because at this point it's an object of fear that has been promulgated by the media as well as the Democratic Party. And they use this, and you'll see I have a couple clips from Tucker Carlson, which is probably one of the most damning interviews I've seen in a long time, talking about how much tech is impacting our elections in terms of search results through Google. But like I said, it is very ignorant to compare drunk driving to, or driving above the speed, even driving above the speed limit, to not wearing a mask. And by the way, when he makes this argument of constitutional provisions, that's not the way the Constitution works. The Constitution works to lay out the powers of government. It doesn't work to lay out the powers of an individual, or else what you would do is every single time any provision, you can make any type of government provision, as long as it's not mentioned in the Constitution, then it would be considered constitutionally legal or a constitutional law. And that's not how it works. The Constitution lays out the powers of the government. If he ever read it, he should know that. I don't know if he actually has ever read the Constitution before. Just like when, Phil Murphy, when they asked him about the Bill of Rights, and he said that's above my pay grade. That was his response, because those are the kind of tyrannical leaders that people, I guess, in this state elect, and in states like Maryland, because Maryland is very blue, which that's why it surprises me that they did vote a Republican in. But that Republican is known as a rhino. He's a big joke. He's pretty much a Democrat. Now, this is a misconception of our Constitution, and it is very disgusting coming from a government elected official that it's like he's never read the Constitution before. I'm not even asking to go read the Federalist Papers. I'm just saying read the Constitution. It's maybe pocket Constitution. I have it right next to me. Look, right here. Look at this. It is this little small paper, 45. It is 45 pages long. That's it. Just read it. It maybe takes you an hour or two. Just read it. Understand it. Understand that is a contract between the people and the government, giving the government certain powers. But then also at the very end, if you look at the Bill of Rights, it does give the people certain powers. Now, if we're going to go double negative style, if it's like anything that's not mentioned in the Constitution automatically means it could be regulated by the government. So the government doesn't regulate certain things in that Constitution. That means that if my rights are not regulated in that Constitution, if it's a specific right, then they can automatically make any law to stop me. So if in the Constitution it says you are entitled, if it does not say I am not entitled to wear green, the government can now make a law telling me to wear green on every single Wednesday. Is that the way that we're going to look at our Constitution at this point? Because then at that point, the people really don't have any rights. Their rights are very minimal and very limited. Now, the way the Constitution actually works is it establishes certain powers for the government. So, for example, one of them is it's the right to coin their own money, as in have their own currency. How we have the dollar here, we have cents. That is our form of currency. Now, as well as establish, this is interesting, establish roads, establish the court system, and establish a post roads and like a post office. See, it gives them the power to establish that. But still, when people say, the post office is you'll need a constitutional amendment to get rid of the post office, that's not true. You don't. They have the right to establish if they want to. If they choose not to, you don't need a constitutional amendment. They can vote that right through the Congress with a majority. There's no constitutional amendment. You don't need. They have the right to establish it, but it doesn't mean they need it. It's not something that's completely necessary. It's not something that shall not be infringed. So you don't need a constitutional amendment for something like that. If you want to establish, if they have the right to establish a post office, because at that time there was no other medium to to talk from one side of the country to another to communicate. So those are just common misconceptions from our elected as well as our bureaucratic officials. They just don't know what the heck they're talking about. And I don't know if it's that or if it's just they think the people are that stupid that they can get away with contriving these BS narratives and making stupid comparisons like that. Now, next, what I have for you is, this is a very, very damning interview. Like I said before, It's going to be Tucker Carlson, and then I'm going to go into some of this tech tyranny that's going on. It seems like these social media companies, as well as Google, YouTube, which is a subsidiary of Google, they're very interested in getting in your brain and telling you what to think and how to think, and mainstreaming things straight into your search engine and not showing any of the results that you actually search for. So now the clip from Tucker Carlson, the clips I have, I'm going to have everything in the description for these next couple articles. It's a Tucker Carlson clip, is from like 2 days ago on his nightly show. Now it is on Rumble, and it comes straight from Bongino Report off Dan Bongino's site. So he begins, Tucker, with the media collusion of the Democrat Party, the media and the Democratic Party working together to help themselves win an election. Play clip 2.
All saw it happen. The media openly colluded with the Democratic nominees. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris refused to explain what they would do if they were elected. That's never happened before in any presidential election in American history, but the media allowed them to do it. At the same time, beginning in the spring, Democrats used our public health emergency for nakedly partisan ends. They punished Trump supporters for trying to gather, but they exempted their own activists, rioters and vandals from BLM and Antifa, from the COVID lockdowns entirely.
At the very end there, what gets cut off, what Tucker Carlson says, is entirely. So what you have going on is, like he states, you had Republicans getting ripped for going out and doing their demonstrations or seeing Trump at rallies, and then you have the other side, and you can't tell me these Antifa people, as well as these Black Lives Matter activists that I don't even want to call them activists, they're just pretty much criminals. They destroy other people's land, they destroy other people's property, they take things, they attack people, they accost people in the middle of the street. You can't say on one hand that these people are being dangerous by going out there without a mask on. Meanwhile, you see these other people looting and rioting and destroying and lighting things on fire. They're not the same act. You can't even compare them. And then on top of that, what she was saying is the media collusion, where he's never seen it before, and he is right. I'm a young guy, but I've never seen anything quite like it. When you have people running for the presidential seat as well as the vice presidential seat, and you don't even ask them any type of challenging questions. When asked if they're going to pack the courts, they don't even have to answer the question, and that's a problem. That the media is not asking any of the questions that are necessary, that are needed. Like, I didn't even know any of those gun control policies until I actually looked them up. I wasn't surprised though when I saw them, just because of the big game that they were talking in the nomination. So the nomination, the Democrats always run super far left for the nomination, and the real truth is, I think the party's actually somewhat more moderate than people seem to believe. They run super far left, and then look who they chose. They chose a Joe Biden-like character who's comes off more like a moderate, even though he really isn't a moderate either. And then once they win, it's, hey, everybody, let's get back together, let's show some sort of semblance, and let's show some sort of union, and we're gonna push our far left policies down your effing throat. That's really what ends up happening. And at least you could say what you want about Trump, but Trump's thing when he won wasn't, union. Trump was like, okay, I won. The people that elected me, I'm going to try to follow through with what my constituents want. And that's it. At least he's honest. I mean, you can say, I don't like his policies, but at least he tried to push for what his supporters believed in. And now what's being contrived by the media was, at first it was like, okay, we hate Trump supporters, we hate Donald Trump, and it was like, Donald Trump, we still hate Donald Trump, but Trump supporters kind of like, come over here and make a union with us. Oh, but then Trump supporters leave, go to Parler, they go to Rumble. Oh, Trump supporters, white supremacists, there's white supremacists on Parler, there's white supremacists on Rumble. So that's the reaction that you get. I mean, how do you expect people, when you're calling them white supremacists and racists all the time? It's almost like that Andrew Breitbart clip when he talks about that and he goes, war at the very end. What do you expect to happen? That's what's going to happen. It's going to be a fight. So you really have the media not questioning candidates about packing the courts, not questioning about really anything, nothing about the Hunter Biden case. You didn't get to hear any of it, essentially. And they are in the pocket of the Democrat Party. And I'm going to play the next clip from Tucker here, where he finally brings on Dr. Robert Epstein, which isn't known. He is a liberal. He actually states it in this interview. He's not a Trump supporter, but he's been tracking Google's effect on the election through their search engines, stuff like that, and he's going to lay out exactly what his study entailed. Play clip 3.
Dr. Epstein has tracked the effect he says Google has had on this month's presidential election, and he joins us now to explain what he's found. Doctor, thanks so much for coming on. What effect do you think have you measured of big tech on the voting outcome this month?
Well, a couple of things that we've looked at so far. First of all, we had 733 field agents in 3 key swing states this year, Arizona, North Carolina, and Florida. And we preserved more than 500,000 ephemeral experiences. That's a lot. That's about 30 times more data than we got in 2016. And we're finding a couple of things that are pretty clear. Number one is that Google's search results were strongly biased in favor of liberals and Democrats. This was not true on Bing or Yahoo. The bias was being shown to pretty much every demographic group we looked at, including conservatives. So in fact, conservatives got slightly more liberal bias in their search results than liberals did. How do you account for that? And then we also found what seems to be a smoking gun. That is, we found a period of days when the vote reminder on Google's homepage was being sent only to liberals. Not one of our conservative field agents received a vote reminder during those days. The good news is, on that 4th day that we were monitoring, we went public with some of our findings, and Google backed off. They literally shut off that manipulation that night, and so for 4 days before the election, they were showing vote reminders to everyone, finally.
For anybody that's familiar with Google, YouTube, the way in which they shut down conservative speech, they've done it to many different people. They banned Alex Jones. Everybody is in accordance with each other. They are all colluding and working together as one almost coherent group, or cohesive group, rather. Now, that's between, YouTube and Google are owned by the same people. It is I think it's called Alphabet or something like that, owns them. And then even Twitter, even Facebook, Alex Jones got banned on all of them at the same time, pretty much, in the same day. So you can't tell me that you guys all don't talk to each other. You guys do. You guys planned that out. And that's because Alex Jones, after the election, they found out that Alex Jones actually had a very large impact on Trump voters, apparently. A lot of people voted for Trump because they listened to Alex Jones, apparently, from what they found. Now, what he states here is Dr. Robert Epstein. Like I said, he was a liberal. He's on the left side. He's not super far left, probably, but he's a liberal. And this is what you'll see what his concern is and why he is doing this studying. Now, he had field agents on 500,000 occasions, like he said, of Google searches, finding biased results, liberal bias. As in, when you go and you search for something, liberal stuff comes up. And I've noticed this myself on Google. That's why I don't use Google anymore. I use DuckDuckGo. That is what I use for my search engine. And he said this isn't noticeable. This does not happen on Yahoo or Bing. So if you feel free, you can go use... I knew that didn't happen on Bing. I've used Bing before, and Bing seems pretty straight down the line. It's just that Google... See, like I said, these companies all collude with each other. If you notice, when you open up your Safari on your Apple product and you decide to search something, automatically it goes to Google, because they are all colluding with each other. They are trying to find ways. And if you really think about the actual reach that Google has, they have the power to really determine how everyone thinks in our society that even uses the internet. Because if I'm thinking iPhone wise, I'd say at least 50% of our population has iPhones. And then if your automatic search engine is a Google search engine, you can really control how 50% of the population thinks automatically right off the bat. And I'm sure the percentage of people that have iPhones is actually probably more than 50%, but I'm just spitballing here. Now, they have the power to really dictate the way in which, a lot of people think. Thousands and thousands, millions and millions and millions of people think. They have that type of power. They determine what shows up when you search things. If I search something and it was something I heard about or I read about somewhere, and I can't remember. I will Google the name of that article, and then I'll try my best to, write the title, and it'll be difficult for me to find it on Google. It will not be easy. That's why, like I said before, I just use DuckDuckGo now, or I use Yahoo or Bing. Now, what he noticed is, like I said before, liberal results come up no matter who the user was, if they were more conservative, more liberal, but actually they found that if it was a conservative user, they were actually more liberal on the search results than they were with regular liberals. So there's obviously a trying to move people over to that side. They're trying to impact the way in which people think. Instead of allowing all of this information to be out there and letting people pick and choose what they believe in, what they're doing is they're mainlining straight into your veins like an IV drip, the way in which you should think. If they show everyone's aim towards a certain way of thinking, even on social media sites as well, you're going to be more willing to switch over to that thought because you want to be accepted by others. The difference between some people is that they want that acceptance, and others do not care. They have no shame. They have some sort of a conviction, and they believe in what they believe in. That's why I have this podcast, because at one point I was on that side. I was on the left side, not completely like super far left, but I was much more liberal socially, especially, and I was liberal on some other things, Second Amendment stuff like that. But then when I started reading and everything, and I never cared about being in the in-group myself. If anybody that knows me personally, they know I don't care about being in the in-group. It doesn't matter to me. I'd much rather be doing my own individualism thing, and that does speak to what the right side does represent. They're much more about individual rights and individualism. They call it rugged individualism. They make it like it's such a bad thing from the left, the way in which they characterize our thought process and our ideology, and we believe in individual rights. We don't believe in the huge collective group, because that huge collective group never ends up working out no matter what you do for that group, because we believe in receiving things for our own toils. The work I do, I want to be owned by me. I don't want some group getting credit for all the hard work I do. So now the next video here is the effect that Google and other tech companies have on the outcomes of elections, and how these manipulations can actually shift votes in different directions. And this is probably the most damning part of the interview, because it's such a substantial number. Play clip 1.
What effect, and we're thankful that you are apparently the only person monitoring this. It controls our Google single-handedly controls our view of the world, and yet no one seems to care. But what do you imagine the effect, what have you measured the effect of this manipulation had on the outcome of the election?
Well, there are multiple manipulations here. We were also monitoring YouTube this time, and Facebook and Bing and Yahoo. The bottom line at the moment is that these manipulations, the ones that we've so far quantified, could easily have shifted at least 6 million votes in just one direction. That's the bare minimum at this point that I'm confident of. The maximum, we haven't even begun to estimate that yet, because we have so much data to look at.
Well, there you have it. There you have it. So 6 million. That's the kind of pull that these social media companies have. At least they estimate, they quantify, as in they're able to estimate at least 6 million votes in one direction, and you know what direction that's in, and you know how much that person won by in this last election. If you believe the results at this point, I think Joe Biden's up by around 5 to 6 million comparatively in popular vote. And that's not only, he said Google, YouTube, all those social media sites as well. And it's amazing that this is the only guy covering it. And it is amazing that, Tucker Carlson's really the only person covering it in the media too. And it seems like the left fringe, they just don't want anything to do with any type of information that is counter to their narrative. I have an article that I'm going to go over here. It's going to be I'm surprised actually by it, but I think it's talking about Facebook. I think it's the Facebook article I have, and that one's actually written by the New York Times. I'm very surprised, because the New York Times is known as like a super far left liberal outlet. And it just really is. It's just disappointing, the social media, as well as just the media suppression. There's just no information coming out of there that is of use. And I'm not even kidding. I turned on. I would watch CNN actually during this whole COVID-19 thing. I watched CNN more than I watched Fox News. And it's nothing but COVID deaths the whole time. We're just talking about COVID, because they want to instill a fear in you. And they know that they can crash the economy in doing that. And then it makes Donald Trump look bad, and then it helps them win their election and keeps people inside, makes them fearful. It's just remarkable. It really is. Everything that goes on, and a lot of people are blind to it, and I can't blame them for being blind to it, because unless if you go on a specific search engine and you search exactly what you're looking for, you're not going to get it, because the social media companies and the tech companies are doing what they can to suppress anything that differs the far left view. So now that he continues here, and this is going to be the last clip from this video, this very damning interview, and now he talks about the influence that Google has in an international way, which is it is insane. It is insane, the type of pull they have. So play clip 12.
And my colleagues, my fellow academics, are often bought by Google with large grants. So, the fact is that if you're a Democrat or you're a liberal, you like what Google and to some extent these other tech companies are doing. You like it. It's to your advantage. The problem, though, is that we don't know who Google is going to be supporting tomorrow. And in fact, in different countries around the world, they don't necessarily support liberals. In some countries, they support conservatives. In China, they worked with the Chinese government to help surveil and control the Chinese population.
So there you have it. Google is working with the Chi-Coms to control the population. So Google, it seems like they have a lot of international interests. They support both a Republican and a Democrat, or a right and a left ideology, just depending on whatever is expedient for them, overthrowing certain government entities and government officials or elected officials to get other ones in place, probably to help them financially the most that they possibly. It's their version of lobbying. What they do is instead of actually lobbying, they just change search engine results. It's actually much cheaper for them because they don't have to pay any money into it. It's just in their algorithm system. And that's what they do. They go and they try to get certain officials elected. It's amazing. And then in the very beginning of that clip, what he alludes to is there's liberals, they don't really care about it, and they're okay with what they're doing as long as it benefits them. That's correct. I've seen that. I've seen that on all the social medias that I'm on. Is this alleged fraud that goes on, or these very weird these mishaps, these inconsistencies in the system, and it seems like no one's questioning it. Everyone just is commenting, "Oh, you should just accept the election results. Why is it that there's no integrity, there's no interest, or no one wants to find out the truth? Everyone's okay with the Pravda just telling them what to think all the time. And it's part of my generation, I guess. I don't really know what it is. I've always been, challenged to question everything just because of the way in which my family is. We argue all the time about things. That's just the way it is. You look yourself, you try to find as much information to have the most persuasive argument. But everyone just accepts it. As long as it benefits you, you don't even care if there was cheating done. Like, this isn't even about, and this has been said now many times, this isn't even actually about overturning a results of an election. This is actually about election integrity, just making sure our system, our democratic system, like the word democratic that the Democrats like to use all the time. That's like their big buzzword that's focus group tested. He's trying to overthrow our democratic system. They say stuff like that all the time, but it's like, this needs to be fixed. Whether it goes one way or at this point, it doesn't even matter. It needs to be fixed, because you can't have a society where people go and they vote and they think their vote doesn't matter, because then this republic's going to fall very quickly. It's not going to last. Every single time there's an election, you just like, all right, I'm going to vote for this guy, but my vote doesn't even matter. You're going to have people not even showing up to vote anymore. It's not even going to matter to them. So that's all that. I have more articles here. I got a Rebel News article. Now, One America News was suspended from YouTube. And this is just part of the ploy. This is part of the leftist, control what people think game, the authoritarianism of our tech tyrants. That's all this is. These are all going to be examples straight down the board of that. Now, and it reads, if I have I don't know if I have the title here. Let's see. It is breaking. OANN, which is the One America News Network, suspended from YouTube for misinformation. Dreaded air quotes. Now, it starts, and I quote, "On Tuesday, 4 Democratic senators sent a letter to YouTube CEO Susan Wojcicki to press on the company to ban channels that spread misinformation about the election, which President Trump contends was stolen from him through electoral fraud in states like Pennsylvania, Georgia, Michigan, and Wisconsin. YouTube claims that One America News Network violated their policy on COVID-19 misinformation. In a statement to Axios, YouTube said that it does not consider One America News Network to be an authoritative news source. In the letter penned by Democrat Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey and his 3 colleagues, Senator Mazie Hirono, Amy Klobuchar, and Gary Peters, YouTube is urged to remove election misinformation videos that boost false fraud claims, seek to delegitimize the 2020 election results, and sow public discord and fuel civil unrest," end quote. So just to start, Bob Menendez is a total jerk. He's a piece of garbage. I'm surprised he's not in jail. He is known for he's alleged to have been doing weird things on planes with underage girls from the Dominican Republic, like apparently 15 and 16-year-old girls. He's just disgusting. He's a disgusting human being, and he's just gross in every single way that I can think of. There's much worse things that I could say about him, but I'm trying to keep it family friendly here. Now, Mazie Hirono is probably the dumbest person in the Senate. She's a total nitwit. She is a moron. Amy Klobuchar is much more respectable. I don't even know who Gary Peters is. But now the most important part is that YouTube does not see One America News Network as an authoritative news source. So now the way that, to me, what that means is now YouTube is applying the method of, who we think is authoritative or who we think is accurate is now going to be the only news that's allowed on our platform, essentially, because that's what they're saying here. And then any misinformation issues, boosting false fraud claims, seek to delegitimize the 2020 election results, sow public discord and fuel civil unrest. Those are all very, very broad claims, especially the sow public discord, because public discord could be you just messaging each other on that social media platform or that YouTube in the comments section. So if there's now if you're putting up a YouTube video and people are putting comments that are rude and nasty to each other, we're just going to take down the video and we're going to suspend the channel, because that could happen on my channel. It could happen tomorrow. So what they did was, these Democrat senators, they sent almost like a question, these weird questions that were aimed towards pretty much silencing conservative voices. And they request responses to the following questions by December 8th, 2020. The very first question is probably the most troubling of them all. Will YouTube commit to removing content containing false or misleading information as to the outcome of the 2020 elections and the upcoming elections in Georgia? If not, why? So the most important part to look at, because this is what they use very broad terms so then they can shut you down later. False or misleading. So which one is it? Is it false or misleading? Because you can consider really anything misleading. If I say this or this, you can say, he took it out of context, no matter what it is. We like this source better. This source puts it in better context. So then what happens? Do I now get my video taken down because I didn't use the sources that the video wanted me to use? Because all news nowadays, news hasn't been news since, Rush Limbaugh was saying it the other day, news hasn't been news since the 1990s. 92. I can't really do his voice that well. He's got that it's a weird southern voice that he's got going on. A lot of swagger, very charismatic. But now, like I said, how is it So now I have to use whatever your news source is, or you're going to take me off. That's the questions. This is what the senators, the Democrats in general, this is what the party's pushing for. The party's pushing for a suppression of any opposing opinions or any objections to what they think, and that's something that's not a free society. That's something that it's like Russian propaganda, disinformation down your throat. Now, what steps has YouTube implemented since announcing its prohibition on voter suppression content? I think number 5 was the other. How much in ad revenue did YouTube receive from videos showing election result misinformation? They want to know that, so then they can pretty much pin it on YouTube and make it like it's you. See, so the problem here is not only is YouTube and these big tech tyrants and these big tech corporations, but also the Democrat Party is pushing these big tech corporations to go further and further to the left and suppress any opinions that are opposing to them. So it's a twofold, which is very unfortunate. Now, next one I have here is Joe Biden's plan for tech censorship. It's an Axios article. This one's actually very, very interesting. And then I get to the Facebook one. The Facebook one is, man, it's absurd what's going on over there. Now, this is an Axios article. I'll leave it in the show notes and now the description. This one was written November 20th, 2020, and just for reference, the last one was written November 24th, so these are like within a week of each other, these articles. Now, this one's about what President-elect Joe Biden, when he enters office, what he's going to do to handle the online misinformation, find a way to, regulate it. Now, it's amazing. A less dysfunctional approach to manage the pandemic by the Biden administration could help reset the misinformation environment. Karen Kornbluh, a former Clinton and Obama administration official who is now director of the German Marshall Fund's Digital Innovation and Democracy Initiative, told Axios these are the things that they're going to do pretty much to shut everybody down. There's a real opportunity to start getting people to feel more civic-minded and also help them understand how to get access to trusted information. Such an effort could include something like a digital version of FDR's fireside chat, walking people through the facts, the latest developments, and what they need to do to get through the emergency together. So they're talking about all this stuff having to do with COVID-19. Pretty much another option, Obama White House veteran and former Facebook policy staffer, Dipayan Ghosh, has suggested the administration could strike an agreement with industry to share data on disinformation campaigns as they're spreading. So pretty much now we're going to get the government hopping into what's going on in our social media atmospheres, telling them what to post and what to allow and what to disallow. That's what it sounds like to me. And then on top of that, civic-minded, and also help them understand how to get access to trusted information. This all to me just sounds like, hey, we're going to tell you what you should read, and you shouldn't read this and you shouldn't read that. And it gets more and more obvious the further and further this article and then the next article go on to explain it. Now, more broadly, Biden will have a few remedies at hand to alter the broader dynamics that have unleashed the misinformation flood. Like there's so much misinformation out there and we just can't handle it. It's too much. It's overwhelming. It's inundating all of us. Now, some Democrats have floated making platforms culpable for misinformation they fail to remove. So if they do not, fail to remove things that they consider misinformation, the Democrat Party, then they're going to make these platforms accountable for it. They're going to sue them, or there's going to be some sort of remedy where they will fight them in court. But the two parties have very different conceptions of what should be done about online misinformation. Unless Democrats succeed in taking control of the Senate via Georgia's 2 runoffs in January, action from Congress is unlikely, which is a good thing. Hopefully they can hold on to the Senate. Although I would actually it sounds terrible, but I would like to actually see what like a full Democrat, what they would actually do and what they would try to install. Not because I want to see anybody suffer, but I would like to just be interested in the way in which they've been running is so far left. I really want to see if they're actually about it and what they're going to do, if they actually do that far left stuff. But then sometimes you might not even know, because they're going to do such far left things. They're going to shut down so many media sources that you are not even going to be able to access the content that you're looking for if you want to find out the truth. You'll have no idea. They're just going to be passing legislation left and right, and then it's going to be contrived by our media as extremely positive, and their narrative is going to be nothing but positivity. Like, for example, I was on CNN, because, like I said, I watched CNN, actually. I was watching it yesterday, and Don Lemon is attributing the Dow Jones being at 30,000, pretty much the stock market hitting all-time highs, record highs, because Joe Biden is now the president-elect, and because he's the president-elect, now our stock market is going to go through the roof. They attribute it to, oh, thank God, Trump's gone, so, the market is going to just freaking skyrocket because it's going to be a Joe Biden administration, which is just outrageous, because I don't know. I mean, since Clinton, I don't know any Democrat that's done anything to help the economy in any of their voting records. So they continue here. Many Democrats view President Trump's executive order targeting Section 230. Oh, this is very important here. Targeting Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which protects online platforms from lawsuits over moderation calls and user-posted content, as sloppy and unconstitutional. Its provision will likely vanish after January 20th. So, that all being said, if it is sloppy and unconstitutional, then why is it that the provision is still there and the Supreme Court has not shot it down? If it's sloppy and unconstitutional, it wouldn't be there. So that's just the way you guys just view it that way. That's what you guys, and then you word it in this way. For people that don't actually know the way in which the government works, they're going to be tricked by that. The way in which you just word it, sloppy and unconstitutional. And then the larger debate over whether the update to Section 230 will continue. Biden himself wants to end the law, so he doesn't want to give any of those protections to these media outlets, or these social media outlets that they call platforms, because he wants to be able to pretty much hit them so hard with litigation that they have to do everything the Democrat Party tells them to do. They don't want a free platform. They do not want free speech, because they do not believe in a civil discourse. To quote what Rush Limbaugh said, they don't believe that they should even have to run in elections. They don't believe they should have to win an election. And the representation of that, it is this last election where both candidates, the vice president didn't even hold a press conference, and the presidential nomination for the Democrat Party, Joe Biden, didn't even have rallies, really. I mean, he was pretty much in his basement the entire time, because they don't believe the Democrat Party. They do not believe, they think that they're so virtuous and they're so elitist above everybody else. And I'm not talking about, moderate Democrats. I'm not even talking about the voting base. I'm talking about the politicians. The politicians, and this is what they truly believe. They believe that they are above elections. They believe that they don't even need to do an election. They think it's beneath them to have to win the vote of people. That's why they don't show up for anything. That's why they don't hold these big rallies like Donald Trump was holding, because they don't believe. They think they should just win, and that's it. And look how easy, if they manipulated all that software, let's say they did, whatever Sidney Powell said, look how easy it was for them. They didn't even have to do anything. They just got these huge money payoffs from big donors, and then they sat there and they waited for their tabulating software to do the work for them. And they don't believe that they should have to even run in elections, because they think they're so far superior. And now this new thing, you see a Biden administration coming in, and he's bringing the swamp back. You got John Kerry. You got John Kerry, who's just a big joker. He's not known for anything. He's not prominent for anything. He's just known as the bureaucrat that just kind of hangs around. He's like that guy that's at the water cooler during football practice that sits the bench pretty much and never gets to actually play it down. And he just hangs out and says really generic, weird things to you while you try to fill up your water. And then you have other people. It's pretty much a third. If Biden ends up being president, it's just going to be a third term of Obama. And that's another thing, is Obama is extremely narcissistic individual. He's the only president in something like 100 years, in a century, not to leave D.C. once he was no longer president. So he's working in the background this entire time. That's this whole Mueller investigation, the hoax, the Russia hoax. It was all contrived and conceived by a Barack Obama administration. He put it together. And that'll hopefully, I wish it would come out, but after everything's said and done, they'll shut that investigation down of who really set up Donald Trump. And then, for example, today they let They gave a pardon to General Flynn. And when I go on social media, it's amazing that there's no context. So they are ripping Donald Trump can let his friends he can pardon his friends from prison. You want to know what they got General Flynn on? They got General Flynn. He did not know that it was he should have really had his lawyer with him. He didn't. FBI agents show up, they have a little interview with him. He's thinking that it's just an interview. He's giving them, there's an investigation going on. He's already been in the government. He worked in the federal government for so long doing, he's a national security advisor for Barack Obama. So he's just answering questions, and he forgets this is what they get him on. This is the perjury charge they get him on, which if he was a Democrat, this would never happen to him because it just wouldn't be enforceable. But the prosecutor would not drop the case. They don't care because, like I said before, the process is the crime, is how they punish you because they know they can't get you with the crime. So what they do is they hit you so hard with the litigation and the process. You're spending all this money by the time everything's said and done, you may win in the end, but you really don't win because you are bankrupt and you have no money. So this is what they did to him. You have the two FBI agents who now under oath are admitting that he was taking this investigation in good faith, this questioning, and he was not, and they both said they didn't think he was trying to deceive them and he was not trying to hoodwink them. He was telling them the honest truth, the best that he could remember. Now, he got a date wrong and a time. He said, let's say it was, I did this meeting on October 23rd, 9 o'clock, when really it was October 24th at, 10 a.m. That's what they got him for. That is the perjury charge. And on social media, I see all of our, Democrat-elected House of Representatives, senators, talking all this trash about Mike Flynn, but they will not say what they got him on because it's obvious that it is a garbage crime that they got him on. It is one of those BS crimes that you lock up your political opponents for. That's what they did to him because during the Obama administration, when Obama was bombing, with drone striking civilians and killing them, he spoke out about it, and he was a whistleblower, and he didn't agree with the way in which Obama handled his international affairs, which is he said that, but you know what Barack Obama should have done? He should have just fired him. That would have been the answer. That's what Donald Trump does. When somebody talks all this trash, you could say whatever you want about Donald Trump. He fires people, but he does not go after you with a police state FBI and get you locked up. He does not take your freedom from you and take your rights from you by locking you behind, a prison or a jail cell. But that's what Barack Obama does because he is a commie. That is called authoritarianism. When you go after people with a police state, you use your police state power, you weaponize your own FBI to go after people that disagree with you politically, because that's what we do now. So that is who Barack Obama is. If you look up all that information, I'm telling you right now, that's exactly what happened. And they won't talk about it. They'll just be like, oh well, he helps his Donald Trump helps his cronies out. They're not actually going to say the crime that he committed, the perjury that General Flynn committed. And then General Flynn, what he did was, then they started going after General Flynn's son. So General Flynn said, hey, listen, he worked out a plea deal with them. He pled guilty because at that point he had no money. They were going after his son. What else is he going to do? He pled guilty thinking, okay, well, at least they'll lay off my son, which they did. And then Sidney Powell, that's when she jumps in, and I'm pretty sure she did it for free. She's doing, legal work for him for free right now just to save this guy because she knows he's a patriot and he loves America and he gave, something like 30 years of his life to our country, and he deserves, a free pass at this point. So then he retracted his statement. He retracted his plea. And then they were fighting in court forever. And I had a feeling Trump was going to... I think that Trump would have pardoned him earlier, but I have a feeling that we want the judicial process to work itself out. We still want some sort of a semblance of constitutional freedoms and positivity in our system. And that's why he allowed it, I think, to drag on. And now, at this point, you can't ensure... If you have a president-elect Biden, you can't ensure under a Biden administration that he's not going to weaponize the FBI against this guy or weaponize prosecutors against him and now get him locked up or, thrown in prison for so many years for the rest of his life. Who knows at this point? Because they're tyrannical and they're authoritarian. And that's all the stuff that goes on in the background that the media doesn't want you to know about. That's another thing too. They don't want you to know about any of that information because it would make you actually feel, it would make you humanize these people. It would make you feel more, tactful towards them. So it's just so reprehensible, everything that goes on in our politics. It's disgusting. Because there's a difference between, having political disagreements and then, because the political disagreements, now you're trying to get your political adversaries thrown in prison. I mean, people have families, and this is a guy that gave so many years. He's a general in our military. Gave so many years of his life to our country. He was a patriot, and that's what you do to him because he lied about a time. And then at the end of this, the whole the Mueller investigation ends up being garbage, and they can't convict anybody on anything. It's found that there was no real Russian impact on any elections. We're talking about 6 million voters in the last video with Tucker Carlson. That's all campaign donations from these big tech corporations, but they're not held to any standard. Meanwhile, we're talking about like 1,000 Russian bots. I mean, the impact is so small, it doesn't even matter at that point. And they would have done the same to Alex Jones if they could have locked him up for something, but they couldn't. That's why they kicked him off all the platforms. That's their answer. And now they're talking about, we're gonna throw Trump in prison for what? That's what in the media. Oh, we're gonna imprison him. I've seen those tweets too, and I go, for what? And there's nothing. They will not write down what it is that they're gonna imprison him for, because they don't have anything. They can't imprison him for nothing. There's a certain amount of qualified immunity you have as the president to begin with, as long as you are. I mean, the impeachment, if they would have impeached him after that, there's nothing that they can get him in criminal court for. What? Obstruction of justice, which is another garbage. There's no justice being obstructed because there was no justice going on. So, but I digress. Now, the misinformation flood has already accelerated political polarization and deepened the pandemic crisis. So that's what I like to see there. So misinformation, because we're polarizing people, we need to get rid of this misinformation. It's deepened the pandemic crisis. What does that even mean? It's deepened the pandemic crisis. Is it somehow exacerbated the pandemic by having misinformation flowing? And this is if all of this is correct, if misinformation, this is just they don't like the information that you're coming out with and they want you to use different information, but they're gonna deem it as misinformation instead. Now, it says most experts agree that President Trump's repetitions of unsubstantiated claims of election fraud qualify as misinformation, but every effort by online platforms to limit them triggers outcries of censorship from his supporters, which is true. Every single time, people get angry with the censorship. No one wants to have to deal with it. After Biden's White House move-in date, we can expect less virus misinformation to flow directly from the presidential pulpit. Yeah, because Biden is going to be all snuggled up in his Snuggie. He's going to be sleeping in his bed while somebody else's handlers are running the government. But huge damage to public trust has already taken place as science has become politicized, and measures to toughen online platforms against new misinformation can't restore that trust. So pretty much they don't have the public trust. We don't have any trust in what they call science, or the science, which I love when they use the term the science, as if the science is set in stone and it can't be changed, because science isn't due to change all of the time. If it weren't for that, then the philosophers like Plato, who said that everything revolved around the earth when realistically all the planets revolve around the sun. And I think Galileo was the one that founded that principle, that everything, he figured it out. But if we go, oh well, that's just the science and that's set in stone, it can't be changed. When you say the statement the science instead of science, use the science as your statement, that means it's set in stone. It is something that is tangible. It is there. It cannot be changed. It is immutable. Where that's not the case. Science is constantly changing. If we didn't constantly change science, then we would just be still living in caves. Now, particularly concerning in the prospect of misinformation and disinformation circulating to discourage people from getting a coronavirus vaccine once one arrives, which is very weird, because I remember when this originally came out, when, hey, coronavirus, if we have a vaccine, are you going to take it? They're asking Kamala Harris, they're asking Joe Biden, and they both, oh, well, if Dr. Fauci says it's okay, but if Donald Trump approves, if Donald Trump says that I should take it, I'm definitely not going to take it. That's their response. So who's the one that was sowing the discord when the coronavirus vaccine comes out? I mean, who was it? Now, Now, Alex Stamos, former Facebook security chief and head of the Stanford Internet Observatory, told Axios, and I quote, "Obviously, disinformation around the election is important, but disinformation about the vaccine will have a body count," end quote. So now we can't put out any type of information that's counter-narrative to what you guys want us to think, because now people will die. This is the way we're going to equate it. It's just like wearing the mask. Oh, everyone's going to die if you don't do what we say. That's the response all of the time, because we live in, they compel you by contriving fear. Now, this is going to end it here. One idea for stemming the damage, Stamos suggests, designating vaccine distribution as critical infrastructure that would authorize government cyber operations to monitor for disinformation and work with federal, state, and local officials to stamp it out. See, now that is the very end, and that is the point of this whole article. They want the government to be working in cyber operations, meaning they want the government to now start running YouTube, start running Facebook, start running Google, and Twitter, and telling them what is and is not allowed, and what to take down and what to keep up. Pretty much propaganda, telling people what to think, and showing only certain results. So you get people that are, unclaimed, or people that are independents to go to your side. Because people that are on the right at this point, they're going to be digging their heels in. Everything that they see that's going on, anyone that's aware or familiar, they're digging their heels in. They're not moving anywhere. Because they believe in certain free principles, certain liberty, and they're unwilling to now change the way in which they think just because you're telling them to do so. They're going to dig their heels in, and they're going to double down just like their president doubled down for the last 4 years. That's what's going to happen. And that's not who they're worried about. They're worried about the people in the middle. They know they're not going to get any of the people on the right. What they're going to do is they're just going to suppress you as much as possible. They're going to kick you off eventually of their platforms. And you're just going to be, disassociated from our society. That's really what they want to do with you. So now this next article, which is probably the most important out of all of them, and I apologize for just going so far, but I think that this is such a critical issue right now in our politics, and it really is something that we have to worry about in the future, and it's very just disappointing that we even have to worry about this. But this article is titled, "Facebook Struggles to Balance Civility and Growth. Employees and executives are battling over how to reduce misinformation and hate speech without hurting the company's bottom line." And this is a New York Times article. It will be in the description. Now, they start with misinformation going viral on the site after the election. And they state, in response, the employees proposed an emergency change to the site's news feed algorithm, which helps determine what more than 2 billion people see every day. It involved emphasizing the importance of what Facebook calls News Ecosystem Quality Scores, or NEQ, a secret internal ranking it assigns to news publishers based on signals about the quality of their journalism, which is such a broad statement. The quality of their journalism. So typically the NEQ scores play a minor role in determining what appears on users' feeds. But several days after the election, Mr. Zuckerberg agreed to increase the weight that Facebook's algorithm gave the NEQ scores to make sure authoritative news appeared more prominently, said 3 people with knowledge of the decision who were not authorized to discuss internal deliberations. So these are people that I guess went to, I don't know if they're whistleblowers, but they went to the New York Times, and they're pretty much telling them, hey, there's this NEQ score, short for News Ecosystem Quality Score, and they are publishers that they like their quality of journalism better. They give them a higher score, and then in doing that, the higher the score, the more often you're going to show up in people's news feeds. So it's pretty much a way in which to control all of the information that people are seeing. So, and it's going to continue, because I'm going to get to this. Now, the change was part of the break glass plans Facebook had spent months developing for the aftermath of a contested election. It resulted in a spike in visibility for big mainstream publishers like CNN, the New York Times, and NPR, while posts from highly engaged, hyperpartisan pages such as Breitbart and Occupy Democrats became less visible, the employee said. So, this break glass operation, that they have here, and they were planning this. They spent months developing for the aftermath of a contested election. So they had the inside scoop that it was going to be a contested election. They knew this information this is how it was going to be, and they chose to do this. They chose to mainline and promulgate CNN, the New York Times, and NPR, which they call mainstream publishers. Like, that just goes to show how partisan you guys are, because then you're calling hyper-partisan pages Breitbart and Occupy Democrats. Like, CNN is so partisan, and then they act as if they're moderate or they're non-partisan. Like, they're the most partisan news station I've ever seen, and they're gonna act like they're not partisan right now. It was a vision of what a calmer, less divisive Facebook might look like. Some employees argued the change should become permanent. Even if it was unclear how that might affect the amount of people spent on Facebook. In an employee meeting the week after the election, workers asked whether the nicer news feed could stay, said 2 people who attended. So you know what it seems like? From what I've read, from what I've seen, Mark Zuckerberg showing up on Capitol Hill, he seems like actually amongst, Twitter, Google, in terms of the magnitude of leftism and shutting down speech, he actually seems like a guy that really isn't too keen on doing that, on shutting down speech. Now, on mainstreaming certain content, I'm not exactly sure where he stands, but he's much more moderate than these other social media site owners or these tech conglomerate owners. Now, he has all these people. His problem right now is he's too nice of a guy, it seems like, and he has all these employees trying to tell him what to do, saying, hey, we should put things on people's news feeds, and this should be a permanent thing, and we should shut down Breitbart, we should shut down Occupy Democrats. And what's going to happen eventually is they continue to do this. They're going to have the free market version. They're going to have a Parler or a Rumble take them over. So they'll have like a new thing for Facebook just for conservatives. But right now, amongst all these sites, I think Facebook takes in the most. They have ads. I mean, me personally, I'm part of a couple conservative groups on Facebook. So they are much more free speech oriented than like a Twitter or a, what's the other one, or like a Google or something. The news, and it continues. The news feed debate illustrates a central tension that some inside Facebook are feeling acutely these days, that the company's aspirations of improving the world are often at odds with its desire for dominance. In the past several months, as Facebook has come under more scrutiny for its role in amplifying false and divisive information, its employees have clashed over the company's future. On one side are idealists, including many rank-and-file workers and some executives who want to do more to limit misinformation and polarizing content. On the other side are pragmatists who fear those measures could hurt Facebook's growth or provoke a political backlash that leads to painful regulation. So you're really having a lot of infighting going on at Facebook. You have a lot of rank-and-file people who these are the liberal elites. These are the Silicon Valley people who think that we should regulate people's speech. They believe in hate speech laws, and they think that we should mainline, that they should be entitled to tell people what to think and what to show on their feed. And then there's other people that are worried about the growth of Facebook. They're really probably more worried about the money, and then they're worried about regulations from the government. Now, it just goes to show what the hypocrisy of the elitist mindset is, and I have one here. I have a quote here. It states, Facebook salaries are among the highest in tech right now, and when you're walking home with a giant paycheck every 2 weeks, you have to tell yourself that it's for a good cause, said Gregor Hochmuth, a former engineer with Instagram, which Facebook owns, who left in 2014. Otherwise, your job is truly no different from other industries that wreck the planet and pay their employees exorbitantly to help them forget, end quote. That's just like the elitist mindset where big corporations are so bad all of the time. Now, this shows people want to see the content that isn't the status quo. This next part of the article, which is very, very telling. It states the company had surveyed users about whether certain posts they had seen were good for the world or bad for the world. They found that high-reach posts seen by many users were more likely to be considered bad for the world, a finding that some employees said alarmed them. So the team trained a machine learning algorithm to predict posts that users would consider bad for the world and demote them in the news feed. In early tests, the new algorithm successfully reduced the visibility of objectionable content, but it also lowered the number of times users open Facebook, an internal metric known as sessions that executives monitor closely. So this is very telling. They took things that they considered. They surveyed users, and who knows who the users are that they're surveying that are saying this is bad for the world. They can be people, they can be in their own echo chamber, they could be literally working for them in Silicon Valley. And now they didn't promote any of that bad for the world content, and then they saw, look at that, less and less people actually tune in, because their version of bad for the world content is probably stuff that's on the right side. And in general, the people that use Facebook are an older population. There's a lot more probably Republican voters on Facebook than there would be on a Twitter or a whatever the other ones are, or an Instagram. So what they probably saw was people, if they're not seeing the content that they want to see, if they don't see a Tucker Carlson clip, they don't see a Dan Bongino clip, a Ben Shapiro clip, they don't even want to, they're like, all right, well, what's the point of Facebook? I can't get any of my news from here because I'm getting this lefty stuff pretty much shoved down my throat, and I don't even want to have to deal with this. I'd much rather just go find my own news, so I'm gonna log off Facebook. And then there's also the philosophy of it, if it bleeds, it leads. So if it's something that maybe is bad for the world that is controversial, maybe that's why people don't tune in if that's not up there. I mean, there's a couple philosophies on it. I personally think that there's a lot of conservatives or right-leaning people that are on Facebook, and they want to see their content. They want to see, because if you turn on the mainstream media, pretty much everywhere it's all hateful Trump stuff. It's hate Trump, we hate conservatives, we hate Trump supporters. So they probably want to see at least some sort of a semblance of an echo chamber for themselves where they can see other opinions that agree with them. Like there's a group on Facebook, which is the most insane group. It's called like something like Leave the Democrat Party. And I found my way into it the other day, and it is amazing the diversity across the Republican Party that there is, and it's people that are, and these scenarios are just, which I never thought these were real scenarios, but it's people that are homosexual or gay or lesbian, whatever they are, their sexuality. They had a harder time coming out to their friends and their family as Republicans or conservatives than they did coming out as gay or lesbian. And then when they went and they did that, all their friends disowned them. And then they go on this Facebook page and they find 500, and this is like the biggest Facebook group I've ever seen. They find 500,000 other people that are in this group with them that have the same stories. And there's a lot of them that are gay and lesbian or bisexual, queer, like LGBTQ community. There's so many of them from that community that all say the same thing. Like I had a harder time coming out as a Trump supporter than coming out as gay or lesbian. And it's the same thing that there's other people that, they went to colleges, like elitist colleges, especially a lot of women. I noticed a lot of like young women where a lot of their friends are very, very liberal, and they end up going on there and they say, I told my friends that I voted for Trump, and they literally, all of them disowned me, and now I have no friends. And it's just nice to be on this page where people are just so free-minded and they're loving and they're nice, and it's polarizing. The politics right now are polarizing. It's disappointing. People used to actually be able to talk even if they were on opposing sides or opposing views, but it seems like both sides are so deeply dug in and they're both so adamant about their views right now that there's no way to even have anything in common. And it's driven by the media base, dehumanizing the Republican Party and calling those people racist, white supremacists. So that's going to be it for this one. Long video, probably the longest one I've ever put up. This is going to be a Thanksgiving Day special. I have it coming out on Thanksgiving. I'm pretty much recording it the night before. But there's a lot of information to soak up here. I'm going to have everything in the description about all the far left policies. Oh, and this is another thing I want to add too. It's just tremendous. On Facebook, these employees, these rank and file employees, when Trump when there was looting going on, one of the nights, I don't remember, one of the after the George Floyd travesty, there was a lot of people that were looting, and I don't remember which city, but Trump tweeted, or he put up a Facebook post, and I think he tweeted it, I'm not sure. He said, once the looting starts, the shooting starts. and all the employees at Facebook got really angry about that because Zuckerberg wouldn't take it down, and he said, hey, listen, I'm not taking it down. And then they staged a big walkout. A bunch of them called out of work. The next couple, they had this, inside organization. And really, Zuckerberg, to his credit, he is, out of all of them, he's probably the best one in terms of being, somewhat fair. He's not great, but he's definitely more fair than the other ones. But Zuckerberg let them do all this and didn't just fire them on the spot. Because he had every right to just fire all of them. Oh, you guys are going to stage a walkout? You're going to stage everyone's... You know how many people are waiting online to make, $100,000 a year doing software engineering, working for Facebook, or some other, frivolous job working for Facebook? Because it's probably a huge organization. They're making tons of money. I can only imagine what they bring in a year. He could have fired everybody on the spot. But he didn't, to his credit, as these people think he's so authoritarian, that he's so terrible. And he decided not to fire any of them. And I just thought that was funny. And to be honest, once the looting starts, the shooting does start. That's what ends up happening. You think you're going to come into the suburban area, these people, if you think that you're going to take what you're doing in these big cities where there's no enforcement of the law, and now, we're expecting the law enforcement officers to walk into people's houses and pull them out in handcuffs in the middle of Thanksgiving. But we're not going to enforce anything when there's looting and rioting in the streets. That's okay. That's fine. In Oregon, that's fine. In Portland, Oregon, for Kate Brown, that's completely fine. But, you have too many people at your house, it's a problem. So what you should do is you should just pretty much destroy your own house for Thanksgiving with your family and, loot or something, and then it'll be allowed. And then it's okay. Yeah, it's just our politics right now are insane. It's ridiculous, everything that's going on. Full credit to a Mark Zuckerberg, who's somewhat, has a little bit of dignity left comparatively to everyone else. But like I was saying, before I forgot my point, the suburban areas, if you think you're gonna do what you're doing in those big cities and then you're gonna somehow carry it over to the suburbs, you are going to face ramifications, because people are not going to be willing. So they work so hard to get out of the city and get into a house and work on that American dream and make the money in order to be a property owner and a land owner. Do you think people are just gonna give that up to you and let you burn their house to the ground? It's not going to happen. In I think in every single state, if someone's trying to light your house on fire, I'm pretty sure you can fire back, or you can respond to that. You can definitely protect your home when someone's trying to light it on fire. That's even in New Jersey. I think in New Jersey, to be honest with you, even if someone's trying to light if I see a Molotov cocktail being lit right outside my neighbor's house and they're about to go throw it, I think I actually still have the right to shoot them at that point. So even in New Jersey, which is a far left state, so just keep that in mind, all you rioters and looters, if you want to do something like that. There's going to be ramifications for your actions. Now, please like, share, subscribe. That's going to be the end of this video. Like, share, subscribe. Drop the mic on people. Like I said the other day, or I'm going to say it in a video in the future, maybe on Friday. I've been getting some crazy amounts of traffic on my Rumble, on my subscriptions, and so just keep it up, I guess. Anyone that's listening, that's subscribing on Rumble, I appreciate it. And everyone have a great Thanksgiving, and maybe I'll see you this weekend, depending on what comes out with Trump litigation. Maybe any other information I find, maybe I'll report on it. But thank you, everyone. Have a great Thanksgiving and have a great weekend if I don't see you.